We're joined now by Richard Goldberg, Senior Advisor at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Richard, welcome to the show. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so you wrote just this week that the Red Cross and the World Health Organization may be complicit in Hamas's use of the Al-Shifa hospital as a base of operations. So what is their responsibility to call out nefarious activity as they see it?
Yeah, so obviously for the International Committee of the Red Cross, their whole job is to preserve the Geneva Conventions. One of their primary missions is access to hostages, proof of life, providing humanitarian assistance to hostages. And so if hostages were being held, as we now know, in Shifa Hospital, where the ICRC, the Red Cross, was based, with doctors, with people on scene, the entire time telling Israel, don't come near this hospital, knowing that there were hostages inside that hospital, inside the terror tunnels. My goodness, that is a complete breach of trust with the international community, with the United States. And by the way, the Congress provides $800 million per year to that International Committee of the Red Cross. Really horrific. And obviously, you mentioned the World Health Organization. They also have facilities there, people on the ground. A different hospital, Rantisi, that was taken over by the IDF, also revealed to have these Hamas tunnels underneath. They found evidence that hostages were at that hospital as well, and even found a baby bottle on top of a box bearing the World Health Organization's logo. So very tragic indeed, but really some anger here that we should have as American taxpayers giving money to these organizations.
We know that Hamas is barbaric. They do not follow the rules of engagement or of war or Geneva. Is there a case to be made that these organizations are actually worried that if they would call out Hamas, it would mean risking the safety of their workers, of their physicians, and the patients that they're serving? Could there be a case made for that?
Well, I think unfortunately we've seen this across every type of supposedly independent actor that operates in Gaza. We've seen this with media outlets. Remember, the Associated Press had somebody who was Hamas affiliated suspended from their bureau. We've seen other outlets of bias exposed there, censorship because of Hamas threats. And now, of course, we see in UN organizations and now the Red Cross. This is not an excuse. If you're going to hold yourself out to the public as independent, as arbiters of truth, remember, they're not just concealing the truth because they're afraid of Hamas potentially. They're also actively promoting Hamas's propaganda, blaming Israel, trying to get Israel into a ceasefire, trying to protect Hamas's infrastructure. So I wouldn't say that they're just neutral actors that are afraid for their own personnel. They're really acting as though they are co-combatants with Hamas in their information war against Israel.
Wow, definitely something that the U.S. should investigate. And as you mentioned, tons of taxpayer money going to these organizations. You know, I want to switch gears to the hostage situation because once Israel starts its ceasefire, which is a part of this negotiation with Hamas to release the hostages, or some of them, is there concern that there could be mounting global pressure on Israel not to resume their fighting at all? I mean, how clear does Israel need to be about their position?
I think there's very high anxiety right now that once you pause operations, give Hamas this room to remaneuver, hold more hostages still. Remember, if there's 50 hostages up front in this deal, they still have 190 left to hold over Israel as further leverage. And what is going to happen over 4 days, 5 days, maybe 8 days of the ceasefire if it's extended, and all that pressure that we've seen already to have a ceasefire gets moved into a posture of keeping the ceasefire. Will there be new antics from Hamas? Will they have trouble finding hostages on that last day and need more time? All of this, I think, is on the minds of Israeli leaders. Now, if they can break through and restart operations and get women and children out of harm's way, recover some of these hostages, it will be worth it because domestically there is just so much pressure, so much emotion going on in Israel to get these families recovering their loved ones. We can't even imagine the pain that's going on there. So if you can get these people out and still continue with the mission of destroying Hamas, it'll be a success. If, however, there is mounting pressure and they do not restart operations, it'll be a big victory for Iran and for Hamas.
Okay, so let's talk about that because to your point, I mean, there is so much mounting pressure inside Israel for these families who you can only imagine what they go through every night, not knowing if their family member is safe who's in hostage, and globally for some of these hostages, even Americans and other global citizens. But this is only partial. This is not all the hostages at the end of the day. So what precedent is it setting? Because Israel is going to release prisoners, Palestinian prisoners. We do have this ceasefire. So what leverage at the end of the day does this give Hamas to know, hey, we have hundreds or over 100 still left that we can now negotiate with?
Yeah, and from day one, sadly, the minute we learned that there was this number of hostages, even one hostage we know that that pulls at the heartstrings of people in Israel. Remember, Hamas lives to die, to kill. Israelis live to live in peace. And so we've seen time and again in Israeli history, the government come under pressure and give extraordinary concessions just to save one life. Remember, about 12 years ago, there was a trade for one Israeli soldier for over 1,000 terrorists, very controversial in hindsight. And so, yes, this is precedent setting. This is about 3 terrorists being released in exchange for every hostage, plus the ceasefire. But I think in the end, if Israelis can get women and children out, can reduce the number of hostages there, and then pick up operations, that's the key. Can they pick up those operations, having recovered women and children, and get back to the business of destroying this horrible, evil terrorist organization?
Before we let me go, let me ask you this, because there are mounting calls on President Biden to actually go after some of these leaders, Hamas leaders who are living in Qatar, who helped plan the October 7 attacks. Knowing that Qatar has been so instrumental in some of these hostage negotiations, and we will need them moving forward, is that the best move for President Biden right now? How should he handle that?
Yeah, we always think about Iran as the primary sponsor of Hamas, and it is the primary terror sponsor. But they have another ideological and financial patron going back decades, and that's the Qataris. And so the fact that Qatar hosts Hamas in Doha, they give them hundreds of millions of dollars. They are truly one of the arsonists in this entire massacre. And so they stepped up to the plate to act as though they were the firefighters for a fire that they helped set. What we need to do is really reset our relationship with the Qataris going forward. They've played this role of mediator, really helping Hamas negotiate their own survival in this process. They're leveraging Israel's emotions just as much as Hamas is. And so once this hostage deal is done and through, and Israel, if it can get back to the business of destroying Hamas, we also need to take a very hard look at our relationship with the Qataris.
All right, Richard Goldberg, appreciate your insight this evening. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And when we come